was going to happen. I knew it was going to happen after the election. I did not think it would happen before all the votes had been counted. But he's been a proverbial dead man walking for several months now.
The acting attorney general is Matthew Whitaker, who had been Jeff Sessions' chief of staff. He's also been critical in the past of the scope of the special counsel investigation. And that concerns Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer.
Protecting Mueller and his investigation is paramount.
Senator Schumer claims ending or limiting the investigation would create a constitutional crisis. Many Washington watchers expect there are more cabinet changes coming, but President Trump told a Wednesday White House news conference.
And I'm very happy with most of my cabinet. We're looking at different people for different positions. You know, it's very common after the midterms. I didn't want to do anything before the midterms. But I will tell you that, for the most part, I'm extremely happy with my cabinet.
The president not so happy with many in the media, and that boiled over Wednesday.
CNN's Jim Acosta has become known for his antics during White House briefings.
If I may ask one other question, Mr. President, if I may ask one other.
His latest exhibition involving he and President Trump talking over each other, Acosta even pushing a female White House staffer's arm away as she reached for the press microphone back.
One of the other folks.
That's enough.
Pardon me, ma'am.
The White House is now suspending Acosta's hard pass. Spokesperson Sarah Sanders tweeting in part, "We will never tolerate a reporter placing his hands on a young woman trying to do her job."
Fox's Tom Graham. Acosta calls Sanders' statement a lie. This is Fox News.
The problem isn't just not being able to hear or understand, or having to tell people to speak louder. Sometimes the frustration is having to repeat yourself too many times, or speaking so loud you're almost shouting. At Guam Hearing Doctors, we understand that hearing problems affect both sides. One of our goals is to help your hearing for those around you. Call us at 989-TEST to learn more.
For over 30 years, Sanford Technology Group has been helping companies throughout Guam and Micronesia with their payroll, time and attendance, networking, and other information technology services. Our online integrated payroll and time and attendance solution provides the workforce management tools and expertise to make your business more efficient and employee-friendly. For more information, visit Sanford Technology at 335 South Marine Corps Drive or call us at 647-0220 to schedule a demo today.
Continues in Arizona in the still undecided Senate race between Democrat Kyrsten Sinema and Republican Martha McSally. Technical troubles blamed for the delay. There may not be a decision in that race until Thursday or Friday. That's one of several midterm races that went into overtime.
Senator John Tester passes the test.
It was a race that broke records, both, I believe, when it's all said and done, and the number of people who have voted in our great state, and the amount of money that was spent.
The Montana Democrat narrowly defeating Republican State Auditor Matt Rosendale for a third term. Democrats flipped the governor's mansion in Wisconsin. Republican incumbent Scott Walker conceding to challenger Tony Evers.
We've seen a lot of enthusiasm about the race and the win that we had last night, and excitement about what's coming to Wisconsin.
And in Alaska, Republican Mike Dunleavy beating Democrat Mark Begich in the race for governor. That contest upended last month when independent incumbent Bill Walker dropped out. Steve Rappaport, Fox News.
Motel 6 agrees to pay more than $7.5 million to settle a lawsuit filed by Latino guests who would claim the chain routinely shared their private information with immigration agents. A federal judge will still sign off on that deal. Jury selection has been completed for the upcoming trial of a notorious drug lord.
A jury of 7 women and 5 men has been chosen in New York City to hear the case of accused Mexican drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. It will also include 4 women and 2 men as alternates. The swearing in of the jury has been delayed until November 13th because the judge is worried people might get cold feet. Jurors who will remain anonymous include 2 who speak fluent Spanish and at least 3 who are first-generation immigrants. Guzman has been linked to nearly 36 murders and drug cartels that traffic large amounts of cocaine and heroin in the U.S. In New York, Tanya J. Powers, Fox News.
In New York, I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
The season of giving is here, and the stations of Choice Broadcasting want to give back. 93.3 The Point, Boss 104, Star 101, and Lux Guam present Charity of Choice. Each of our radio personalities have chosen a Guam charity that they would like to benefit.
And I chose Habitat for Humanity. Tune in daily to see how you can help.
Charity of Choice 2018 is brought to you by Choice Broadcasting Company, Lux Guam, American Water Tech, and the station that gives from the heart, 93.3 The Point.
Call the experts at Guam Hearing Doctors if you're worried about your hearing. The evaluation is simple and painless.
Konnichiwa! We'll be celebrating the 39th Japan Autumn Festival on Saturday, November 17th, 2 to 9 p.m. at the Governor Joseph Flores Beach Park or Ipao Park in Tumon. Parking will be available across Oka Payless with free shuttle service starting at 1:30 p.m. Advance tickets available now at the Japan Club of Guam office located on the first floor of PM Marine. Once again, the Japan Autumn Festival at Ipao Beach Park, November 17th from 2 to 9. Come join us. For information, call 646-8066. Thank you to our platinum sponsor, Bank of Guam, and the radio stations of Choice Broadcasting.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Sanford Technology Group, STG, delivering service that can't be beat.
If you can dream uncommon design and unprecedented engineering, you define the 2018 Lexus. The boldly designed IS Sport Sedan's aggressive design stimulates the senses.
Advanced paddle shifting puts the exhilarating performance of the IS Sport Sedan at your fingertips. With deep, luxurious seating, the ES350 offers an ultimate level of comfort, while cutting-edge engineering delivers a thrilling drive.
Put yourself in a 2018 Lexus.
Now with special incentives.
At Atkins Kroll.
Jeff's Pirates Cove, open daily at 8 a.m., serving up hot breakfasts with endless coffee and a taste of history. Celebrate Thanksgiving lunch at Jeff's Pirates Cove. Call them for reservations at 789-COVE.
Family Finance, serving the people of Guam since 1959. Now you can start planning for the holidays by getting a personal Christmas loan from $1,000 up to $3,500. Family Finance has 3 convenient locations to serve you. Give them a call in Dededo, 633-4473, Hagåtña, 475-4545, and the Upper Tumon location on the 2nd floor of the Pacific Building at 647-5626. Get your Christmas loans today from Family Finance.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's what we stand for here on Tall Tales. We are constitutionalists. We take every word of the Constitution to heart, talk about it a lot, interpret it, criticize those who get it wrong, and encourage everyone to follow its dictates. I'm going to not go into my long diatribe about Mr. Justice Antonin Scalia and his inability to read the word militia. I'll give him a break today, but I usually do something along those lines. Not today. I'm going to go straight into what we call on Tall Tales Zemi-Ikotni. Zemi-Ikotni is actually as you well know, it's my backwards bilingual play on words. Zemi-Ikotni, press the meet, or in our particular case, meet the press, which causes the real Joe Cruz to hit the meet the press button back there in the control room, bombarding the airways with the theme music from Meet the Press. So this is our local equivalent, and it's our entree into the Fourth Estate. The Fourth Estate is a societal or political force or institution whose influence is not consistently or officially recognized. The Fourth Estate most commonly refers to the news media, especially print media or the press. We are not print media, except for my bilingual backwards play on words. We are not the press. but we comment on the news. So in that respect, I would suggest that we are a part of the Fourth Estate, and the Fourth Estate is extremely important to the operation of a free society. It's kind of the press that keeps things on the right track. And what we do here in Demi-Ekotny is we look at the editorials for each of the daily newspapers, and we're trying to figure out which one is the most topical, edgy, informative, hard-hitting, whatever. The one that makes you say, wow, that's a good point, or, you know, that's wrong as heck, or, you know, I never thought about that before, or, you know, those are good points. I'd like to see that happen. Sometimes when we finish reading one or the editorials, sometimes both of them, we say, was it really necessary to use that much ink to say so little, Mr. Daily News or Mr. Post? So we start out today with, we're still stuck with the election. It's going to be a while, I think, before we get back to kind of a normal approach to the news, which isn't based on the election. So I've got the editorial for today's Daily News, and I'm also going to pick up on something that I mined from yesterday's paper. You recall yesterday I gave the blue star to the Post, but I gave something new, a new award to the Daily News. I gave the I Award to the Daily News because they picked up on something that Ismail Velez, one of the citizens of Tall Tales Nation, who's a regular participant here, suggested, and that was honoring the late Ignacio Camacho Fatfan. And I got so carried away doing that I forgot to mention the letter to the editor that I mined from that same paper. So I'll go back to that after I finish Demi-Ekotny before I go to the card. So here's the Daily News for today. The voters of Guam have selected new leaders in an election that was in many ways historic. Lilian Guerrero will be the first female governor of the island. Josh Tenorio, the first openly gay candidate in a race for Adelup, will serve as lieutenant governor. For the first time here, women will outnumber men in the legislature. Of 15, 10 senators elected by voters, 10 are women. Around the nation, women and minorities made history in other election night firsts at the polls. According to USA Today, in Colorado, Jared Pollack became the first openly gay man to win a governor's race. Women candidates on Tuesday broke the record for the number of first-time House members, with 26 winning their elections as Democrats took control of the chamber. In New York, activist Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, 29, became the youngest woman elected to Congress. And I think not only the youngest woman elected to Congress this time, but maybe the youngest woman ever elected to Congress. I can't remember who it was, but I think a younger man was elected. I think someone was elected before he'd even turned 25. I got to check that out. And he had to wait till his 25th birthday to be sworn in. In Minnesota, Ilan Omar and Michigan's Rashid Tlaib became the first Muslim women elected to Congress. New Mexico's Deb Haaland and Sharice Davids of Kansas became the first Native American congresswomen, Now, a congresswoman is either a member of the House or the Senate. So I'm surprised that I haven't seen a protest, or perhaps the word hasn't reached her yet, but I suspect that Elizabeth Warren will call for a clarification here as to who the first Native American woman elected to Congress was. She's claimed that title herself. New Mexico's Michelle Lujan Grisham became the first Democratic Latina governor in the country. We've already had a Latina governor of New Mexico who was a Republican. While the gains made by women minorities are cause for celebration, there's one historic achievement on Guam that we hope does not become a trend. Despite a record number of registered voters, turnout for Tuesday's election was 66%, by far the lowest in the history of Guam on a general election year, according to Guam Election Commission data. Attorney Patrick Seville, the independent member of the 7-member Guam Election Commission, said some people indicated that negative campaigns kept them from the polls. The candidates and campaign managers might want to remember that for the next election season, which will be gearing up before we know it, we all want the best for our community, and leaders who build coalitions and find common ground can be more appealing than those who tear down opponents. So there's already a tall tales ruling on negative campaigning. Patrick, if you're listening, and negative campaigning is fair game. Saying something that's truthful and accurate about your opponent is negative campaigning, and so long as it meets those criteria and it's not anonymous, it's part of the political process. What we saw in the last campaign was not so much egregious negative campaigning, but anonymous smear campaigning, which is something altogether different, and that may very well have turned people off. So that's the daily news. Before I go to the Post, I'm going to make my mark here and pick up this phone call. Hello, Mark. What happened to Mark? Okay.
Maybe he'll call back.
All right. Well, maybe you can call back, Mark. He was there until I pushed the magic button. Okay, so then we go from there to the Post. And the Post's editorial is time for election winners to help those hurt in the divisive election. Now, if I could have your permission to be self-laudatory for the moment out there in our international radio listening audience, who, if you so desired, can give me your express permission either by logging into Facebook or by calling 888-TALK, 888-8255, which is the way that you get to participate vocally in Tall Tales, if you so desire. But I did my bit to help those who were hurt by a divisive election by reading Theodore Roosevelt's Man in the Arena speech at the very beginning of the program yesterday morning, complimenting those who had the grit and fortitude to throw their hats in the ring, jump in, and take on a tough task. Anybody who's ever done it, even people who've never lost, will tell you, even when you win, it's a tough road to hoe. So yesterday was my day to compliment those who gave their best shot, but didn't prevail. But they still deserved a round of applause, which we gave them, didn't we, real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So here's what the Post says. Many of the general election candidates fought hard and put up some serious cash and a lot of time for the chance to become an elected Government of Guam official. It's been a very competitive campaign, but unfortunately for some candidates, their efforts came up short. We congratulate the winners in the 2018 election, and we also hope they extend a hand to those who lost. The losers are hurting, and it takes a sincere gesture from the successful campaigns to open the door for reconciliation. It's time to heal. Some of the candidates who didn't make it offer a wide range of experience, and we hope that they would eventually land jobs or continue on their careers with a sense of pride that they did the best they could in a tough election fight. Guam made many firsts in this election. Governor-elect Lulian Guerrero will be the island's first female governor. She is well on her way to take on the role of GovGuam's chief executive in January, having led a local bank that grew during her leadership from a $900 million financial institution to one that reached nearly $2 billion in assets. However, there's a caveat. She does need to outline to the public how to separate her interests as a co-owner of Bank of Guam's parent company from the government's use of the same institution for the bulk of its banking services. It will be the first time the 15-seat Guam legislature will have a majority of women lawmakers, reflecting a sea change across the nation, showing more women running for public office and many of them having a good shot at winning. The lieutenant governor elect makes history of his own, too. Josh Tenorio becomes the first openly gay lieutenant governor of Guam, something that gay rights organizations highlighted even before his win. Former journalist Clint Rigel also made history as the first candidate of Chuukese heritage to become a Guam senator. Amid all of these reasons for celebration, there was a downside. Guam Election Commission Executive Director Maria Pangilinan said she was disappointed with the turnout. Out of almost 56,000 registered voters, a recent high for Guam, the turnout was a dismal 66%. In 2016, which wasn't a gubernatorial election year, Pangilinan said the turnout was 69%. Some more statistics here. Pangilinan said, "It saddens me that of those that registered, not that many came out to vote. We," meaning the Post, "are saddened too. Despite crucial issues in this election, about a third of Guam's voters didn't find the time." Well, that's kind of the way it goes. So when I weigh the two editorials, I have to give the blue star to the Post this time, because there was a little, I wouldn't call it edginess, but there was a good point was made that needs to be paid attention to, and that is Lulian Guerrero has a problem before she's even sworn in, and that is her affiliation with a very large bank, the largest bank on the island, and the bank that does for which the government of Guam does all, or with which the government of Guam does all its banking. So we're going to be watching that, according to the Post. So here it is. The Post got it today. I can hear the champagne corks popping in the editorial boardroom of the Daily News right now. And I've got to go to that column that I mined from yesterday's Daily News. It's not a column. It's actually a letter to the editor. It's from a gentleman named Paul Zerzan. Or maybe it's pronounced Zerzan. I'm not sure, but Paul has been off and on Guam for a long, long time. He's a former public school teacher on Guam. He's well-traveled, well-read, pretty articulate, and is not afraid to come forward with provocative comments. And Paul says, the title of Paul's letter is "Hold Another Forum at UOG to Examine New Caledonia's Recent Vote." And if you didn't happen to notice, New Caledonia, which is an island close to straight south of us, a very large island, it's about 200 miles long, which has been a French colony, French possession, and now it's represented as an integral part of the French nation, had a vote on whether or not it should separate itself from whether New Caledonia should be separate from France. So there was a vote, and the anti-separatists won. And the question presented in the vote was this: do you want New Caledonia to attain full sovereignty and become an independent nation? That was the question on the referendum. And this is what Paul Zerzan says. In 2016, a forum was held at the university with the forum co-presented by Levin Camacho to update the people of Guam on preparations for a decolonization vote in New Caledonia. It was proposed in the forum that New Caledonia serve as a case study for Guam decolonization. The decolonization vote took place on November 4. This vote took place under United Nations supervision and followed UN-approved procedures. I think another forum, Zerzan says, I think another forum should be held at UOG to follow up on this case study so Guam can hold its own decolonization vote and move forward with political development. The UN-approved vote in New Caledonia was open to all ethnic groups, regardless of ancestry or national origin. Now, I checked through this, and there were some residence requirements as to how long a person had to be in New Caledonia and some other things like that. So you couldn't, you couldn't move to New Caledonia today and vote in the plebiscite next month. Zerzan says this is in accordance with the UN requirement for, quote, universal adult suffrage. In Guam, such a vote has been hampered by the claim that such a vote can be restricted to the descendants of the colonized at the exclusion of the descendants of the colonizers. This is false. The UN recognizes individual rights, not, quote, group rights. That would divide communities and thwart true democracy. Well, so let's hold another forum at UOG to examine New Caledonia's recent exercise in self-determination and follow their example. And then I went back and found the Daily News article of September 3 that dealt with that forum. Obviously I read it in September of 2016, but I forgot about it, and it's too bad. I should have brought it out sooner because it is kind of relevant. This is what it says. By 2018, New Caledonia is expected to hold a vote to determine whether the island will remain a French territory or become its own independent country. New Caledonia's plebiscite has been 20 years in the making. The plebiscite was written into the Noumea Accord, a 1998 agreement with France that was the result of years of political unrest and armed conflict. Guam residents know a thing or two about waiting for such a vote that could decide the island's future political status. I don't think, not the way it's been structured, but anyhow, that's what the Daily News article said. The situation of Guam is replicated across our Pacific Ocean, said journalist and researcher Nick McClellan. McClellan participated in a forum at the university. The forum was held to update the island on decolonization efforts in both Guam and New Caledonia. Guam's plebiscite has been long delayed for nearly 2 decades. Governor Eddie Calvo, wow, already? The first 5 minutes, half an hour really goes fast, doesn't it, real Joe Cruz? Okay, I want to come back and I want to wrap up the New Caledonia decolonization matter and move into the card. And that'll be the time that we greet all of our Facebookers who have joined us for today's exciting trip on the starship Tall Tales.
I'm John Gibson. This is My Word. These days, we're accustomed to seeing reports of White House dinners for foreign dignitaries that involve the finest dishes one could wish for in any five-star restaurant. So, why did Franklin Roosevelt's White House serve such famously terrible food? The answer? The Depression. Eleanor Roosevelt, the First Lady, was from a rich family. She'd never cooked anything. But Mrs. Roosevelt knew millions of American women who did cook were struggling with feeding their families. So she enlisted a woman to help her design meals that were nutritious and, well, cheap. Depression-era families had to skimp on food. The penny-stretching recipes Mrs. Roosevelt came up with were widely broadcast in newspapers and on radio. They helped mothers feed families on almost nothing. It didn't taste good. For instance, the president would be served a meal of deviled eggs with tomato sauce, mashed potatoes, and prune pudding, a 10-cent meal. When Ernest Hemingway came to the White House, he was startled to be served what he called rainwater soup and rubber squab. It may have tasted terrible, but the awful food was what got many families through the Depression. Just ask your great-grandmother. I'm John Gibson. That's my word.
Enjoy a world-class breakfast in historic Talafofo at Jeff's Pirates Cove. Serving as both a military dispensary, recreation, and rehab center for pilots after the war, Jeff's Pirates Cove offers a taste of local history while you start your day with a delicious omelet or steak and eggs. If you're on a budget, pick up one of Jeff's $8 breakfasts, all served up with endless coffee. For reservations and information, call 789-COVE. That's 789-2683. Start your day at Jeff's Pirates Cove. Open daily at 8 a.m. in historic Ipan, Talafofo.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Now, well, here we are. So I'm going to give you a little historical tidbit that you can amuse and amaze your friends with the next time you go to a cocktail party. I'm just picking this up from John Gibson's piece from Fox News. Franklin Roosevelt's wife was Eleanor Roosevelt. Do you know what Eleanor Roosevelt's maiden name was? What was her name before she married Franklin? Well, the answer is Roosevelt. Eleanor Roosevelt married Franklin Roosevelt. They were fifth cousins, and I don't know exactly how that worked out, but I wonder if on their honeymoon they discussed the upside and downside of nepotism within a marriage. But anyhow, that's the little bit of historical trivia that you could pick up from today's episode of Tall Tales. So I'm going to go back to New Caledonia now with this piece this story from the Daily News. McClellan, one of the moderators of the forum at the university, said he wanted to use New Caledonia as a case study for Guam's self-determination. One similarity that the islands share is immigration, McClellan explained. Guam has attracted many people from nearby islands who are seeking work and education. He said similarly, he explained that New Caledonia has attracted individuals in the French Pacific Islands, making it a multi-ethnic society. New subject. Attorney Levin Camacho also participated in the UOG forum. That very Levin Camacho, the Attorney General-elect, participated in this forum back in September of 2016. An audience member at the forum asked what it would take for Guam's plebiscite vote to overrule the U.S. Congress authority if a referendum does occur. Only Congress has the power to determine Guam's future political status. Camacho said it would require international law and international bodies to step in. I wonder how that would work. And then Camacho went on to say, I refer to Congress as Guam's fourth branch of government. They are the highest branch of Guam's government. In terms of turning over court decisions regarding the rights of Guam and other U.S. territories, Camacho said, it's going to take the territories beating the federal government at its own game. One way, he suggested, was for the local government to pass certain gun legislation that wouldn't pass in the states. Anytime we want to change something, we have to run to, I don't understand this, we have to run to Congress to change it, Camacho said. We can't do some things on our own the way things stand. Unlike, and then there's a contrast with the Organic Act. Unlike the Organic Act of Guam, the Noumea Accord gave New Caledonia more autonomy, creating such institutions as a territorial Congress and 3 provincial assemblies. New Caledonia's voting rights also differ greatly from Guam. Although Guamanians are born U.S. citizens, they're not allowed to vote for president. Well, that's not exactly correct. If you live on Guam, you're not going to be able to vote for president, no matter where you're born. In New Caledonia, citizens can vote for France's president, and they also have a voting representation in the French Senate and National Assembly. That's what I meant when I said that New Caledonia is arguably a part of the nation of France. And I have opined before that a U.S. citizen living on Guam is not able to vote for president because of some flaw in his citizenship, but because of the design of the American Republic, where although civil rights may have a national dimension, political rights are matters of state citizenship. No state citizenship, no political rights. If the United States were a unitary democracy like France, it would have been really easy to allow people to vote for president from the island of Guam, but that's not where we are. Anyhow, I think that was a pretty interesting article, and it sort of shed some light on the thinking of our Attorney General-elect. Okay, before I go into the card, you know that clever song that you play to welcome people back, Real Joe Cruz? Yeah, that's the one. The very one. So welcome back, Michael Williams Sr. and Ishmael Velez, Tom Moffness, Evelyn Uggan, Shelley Gibson, and Shelley Gibson points out that she's only a couple minutes late. Well, good for Shelley. Let's give her a round of applause on that one, Real Joe Cruz. Congratulations, Shelley. And we got Ted Lewis from the farther reaches of mainland, from our mother country, mainland America. And Tom Tahaji and Juanita Machi, who is, I think, almost perfect attendance. Lynn and Vince Boropolino, Ellie Taitigui, Ishmael Velez, and then I've got Daryl Taggarty, who wants to go back and comment on the election results. And Daryl is also, of course, a citizen of Tall Tales Nation, a longtime passport holder. So I'm going to grant leave to Daryl to go back and talk about the election a little bit. Here's what he says. Looking to see how wide in the talent pool, in the talent pool is to address the problems kicked down the road for years. Hopefully we don't see those who stalled progress in the past. We all need for Lou and the new legislature to succeed beyond our expectations. They can if they reject the politics of the past. Well, we'll see how that one works out. And then let's see, I've got Carl Nelson's here. He says, better late than never. That's a proposition that he has put to the test on more than one occasion. Our Carl. And let's see, did I miss anybody? I guess I've got everybody. I got, let's see who I got here. I got Clayton on the phone.
Hey there, Bob.
Afternoon, Clayton.
I'm disappointed that, the election hasn't been certified and already the Post has to come out with, this editorial and, leave it to the media to throw out identity politics. And, first of all, I didn't know that the lieutenant governor-elect was gay. I don't care, I don't care if you're a woman. I don't care if you're black, if you're Chukis, your child. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you got out there, you gave it your all, and there's no losers. If you got so much as one vote, that means somebody, was in your camp and thought you were worthy. But, even the losers on the senatorial side got thousands of votes. Hooray for them. They're all winners. They got out there and tried, and not everybody's going to win. They knew that going into the game. So I wish the media would, give it a break and just let all of these, hardworking people who won and, who are reelected, and now you have a majority of Democrats in the legislature, and the majority of them are women, and you have the first female governor who'd offer her. And so there's a perfect storm of opportunity to just, do a lot of good, and not that past administrations haven't, but, throwing the bomb out there that, oh, gee, just because she's a major stockholder in the Bank of Guam, something's amiss. She's got more SEC federal regulations looking over her shoulder that there is nothing the government of Guam, could add to that other than just to screw things up. So leave it, if the procurement for banking services is done on the up and up, which I'm sure it is, then, she's got her bank, since she's not running it anymore, and I guess she's going to do something with her stock. I don't know. I mean, she could put it in a trust. Who knows? But the fact is that the Bank of Guam has done a lot for the government of Guam and for the citizens of Guam for many, many, many years, where why haven't, the Bank of Hawaii, First Hawaiian Bank, Costa Rica, why haven't the others stepped up to the plate? Because it's a very fragile proposition, to be involved with the government of Guam and making sure all those checks clear. So I just wish the media would give it a break and, take a hiatus for 6 months. Talk about something else but politics, Talk about, the weather or Fiesta plates or whatever.
Well, a lot of what you say, Clayton, makes good sense. I don't want the two papers to write editorials about the weather, because that's an important part of Tall Tales. And
well, I guess, less fodder for Tattletale Nation, but, it's just, I'm so sick of this, every single identity has some special right. Everybody, we're all citizens, period.
Well, that's where I really agree with you, and I've decried this resort to identity politics more than once on this program, and I see it as extreme, potentially very injurious to our island, and in a sense, it takes something away from Lulian Guerrero. Lulian Guerrero won a hotly contested election. She's a person of great accomplishment, and do we have to qualify that by saying, oh yeah, and she's a woman too?
Thank God we have the accomplishment that it's the first Chamorro female to be governor. That's something that should be recognized. But beyond that, she's an accomplished woman, and she didn't grow up with a silver spoon in her mouth. Her father started that bank and worked his butt off, and they became successful, just like the Cowboys. So You got all the Payless supermarkets, mid-pack, I mean, on and on and on. But, you know, that should not disqualify the government of Guam from doing this. I mean, you know, it's like, okay, gee,
now see,
you shouldn't go to Payless.
I kind of take an opposite view, or not an opposite. I would distinguish my view from yours, Clayton, and that is that companies that do business with the government of Guam have a special burden when a person who is closely affiliated with that company has a relationship, has a position in the government of Guam. And it has never been shown that the Bank of Guam got the government of Guam banking through the procurement process. That's a question that's been asked more than once, and it has never...
Maybe it needs to be. I mean, that's a legitimate question, and you know, whatever the process is supposed to be, it should be followed. And I think they'll find that probably a lot of banks don't want to have anything to do with the government of Guam.
Well, and then there's another angle, too, and that is that because of special legislation here, off-island banks and local banks don't play according to the same rules. It's a little more difficult for an off-island bank to grow to the size of the Bank of Guam, but that doesn't detract from your point. So I'm with you on 2 points. You made 2 really good points here today, Clayton, and that is that everybody who ran, in a sense, takes something away from the election to be proud of, and the Daily News, I mean, the Post doesn't need to sort of hang crepe on that. And then the second, the constant resort to identity politics doesn't do any of us any good. So because of that, Clayton, I'm going to depart from tradition, and I'm going to give you the coveted blue star. I think that's only happened once before, Clayton. So congrats.
You made my day. You know. I think the last time I got any kind of star was like 3rd grade elementary school. So that's been, you know.
You might want to do a screen capture of that page on Facebook so you can show it to your friends and relatives, right?
I don't do Facebook. You know, I don't need that many friends. I got enough.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot for calling Tall Tales, Clayton.
All right. Thank you, Bob. You have a good day.
So long. Good timing there, Real Joe Cruz. Dave Brubeck's Take 5.
Bring joy to your world and your budget with a holiday loan from First Hawaiian Bank. At a low 4.99% APR, fixed for 1 year, it's a smart way to add ho, ho, ho without budget uh-oh. To apply for a holiday loan, visit any First Hawaiian Bank branch or FHB.com. For more information, call 1-877-640-2337. Additional restrictions apply. First Hawaiian Bank. It all starts with yes. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
So if anybody out there in our international radio listening audience would like to attempt a Clayton, a new term of art, attempt a Clayton, dial 888-8255, and when Real Joe answers the phone, tell Real Joe your answer and say, I want to do a Clayton. And I suspect the Real Joe will put you on the air in a heartbeat. So this is one I got on my card for today. Of course, Les Paul Gibson versus Chet Atkins Fender. I'm still waiting for those guys to post or call in. Or I wonder whatever happened to Les Paul Gibson. I don't see him anywhere anymore. And Palookaville versus the government of Guam. And then I also have the Archdiocese of Agana versus Creditors. And the second chapter of Winners versus Losers. And then independent Guam versus the United States Navy. The United States of America versus the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, and that's got some interesting stuff, historical stuff there. And Paul Poplu versus the legislature. And Trump and birthright citizenship. I guess that's kind of gotten a little bit stale. And Dennis Rodriguez and your money. And then, of course, in deference to you, Real Joe Cruz, Chamorro versus Chamorro, because try as I will, I never seem to be able to finish that item on the card. I know you're very curious about Chamorro versus...
That's the debate of the century, sir.
Yeah, Madmumu y Chamorro, Johnny Chamorro, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Ungan.
So Archdiocese of Agana versus creditors. The Archdiocese of Agana to file bankruptcy to settle clergy sex abuse claims. And all four of the media outlets covered this, and this is pretty important news. And what it amounts to is that the church has said that it will file a Chapter 11 bankruptcy December or January, and a North Idaho-based bankruptcy attorney. We have to go all the way to North Idaho to find a bankruptcy attorney? That seems kind of strange, doesn't it, Real Joe Cruz?
Yeah, it does.
Maybe when we bring him out here at the wintertime, maybe he'll come out for less money just to escape the North Idaho winters, huh? So his name is a little tricky. I believe it's Elsa Esser. It almost sounds like a lady's name, right? Mrs. Esser's daughter, Elsa Esser. But that's his surname, Elsa Esser. And his first name is Ford. That's pretty interesting, too. I wonder if he has a brother named Chevy. Probably not. Okay, anyhow, enough of that. The Archdiocese of Agana is the 20th Catholic diocese in the United States to file for bankruptcy since 1994 to help settle clergy sex abuse claims, according to attorney Ford Elsa Esser, who was tapped by the Archdiocese to help in the process. Elsa Esser said there had not been a substantial disruption in the mission of the church, schools, and other Catholic community activities for these dioceses that file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. I'm going to refer, I don't know the guy, but I'm going to start referring to him as Ford instead of Elsa Esser. It's too easy to mispronounce that and screw it up. So I'm going to just stick with Ford. So Ford said that that once the Archdiocese of Agana files for bankruptcy, there will be a bar date. And what that means is there will be a date before which all claims must be filed in order to be included in the bankruptcy proceeding. He said, and that would take about 4 or 5 months up to May of 2019. That will be the opportunity for all of the abuse survivors who have not at this point decided to bring a claim but may decide to. Once the notice is out there, they will have an opportunity through a very simple and straightforward process to file claims. Unlike other defendants in clergy sex abuse cases, such as the Capuchin Francisco Order, Sisters of Mercy, and Boy Scouts of America, the Archdiocese has not settled with nearly 200 plaintiffs, except for 2, the Archdiocese says. So it appears that the settlement process between the sex abuse victims and the Archdiocese has the same time standards as the awarding of war claims by the Claims Commission back in D.C. It moves at a somewhat glacial pace, apparently. Ford said part of the process is for the Archdiocese to identify all its assets and liabilities, including insurance money. If settlement fails, the civil cases naming the archdiocese and dozens of clergy, including Archbishop Apparon and more than a dozen priests, could go to trial. Archdiocese co-counsel Keith Talbot said a bankruptcy filing brings finality to the archdiocese and delivers the greatest measure of justice to the greatest number of victims. One of the groups of lawyers representing such plaintiffs in the clergy sex abuse cases believes the church's bankruptcy filing provides a path to settlement for the victims. Bankruptcy provides the only realistic path to settlement of pending and future claims, according to Idaho-based attorney Leander James. I wonder if we have some kind of a sister city relationship with Idaho? Leander James, a sex abuse lawyer working with Guam-based attorney Tony Paris. James said that the group welcomes the archdiocese's announcement. Attorney Craig Vernon, working with James and Paris, said the bankruptcy will provide an opportunity for abuse victims who file timely claims to be compensated while also allowing the archdiocese to retain sufficient resources to continue its work. Paris said, just because the archdiocese is filing for bankruptcy does not mean it will go out of business. In my discussions with attorneys from the team with extensive experience in these types of bankruptcies, this filing will allow the archdiocese to reorganize and still be operational after the claims are paid and the bankruptcy is closed. James said the archdiocese bankruptcy filing will automatically stop any further action in lawsuits that have been filed and will create a deadline for all Guam clergy abuse victims to file claims. So part of the bankruptcy process is what's called an automatic stay. So any lawsuit filed in any court, once the bankruptcy is filed, the proceedings in that lawsuit would be stayed, can't go forward. And it will be important for those who have not come forward to do so and file their claim, said James, who, along with Vernon, has extensive experience in Catholic Church bankruptcies. There are important deadlines in bankruptcies that must be met. All claims against the archdiocese must be filed by the claims bar date. Going on a little bit, the four other groups of lawyers representing plaintiffs are David Lujan, Michael Berman, Charles McDonald, and Kevin Fowler, who works with Seattle-based Stephen Reich, a partner at Faw Cochran at Vertetis Amala. The Archdiocese announcement follows mediation with a Paris group of attorneys in which the group said it successfully reached undisclosed settlements with the Capuchin Francisco Order, Sisters of Mercy, and the Boy Scouts of America, but not with the Archdiocese. We are pleased to win settlements with the co-defendants, Paris said. We can now help sexual abuse survivors reach fair settlements with the Archdiocese through the bankruptcy process. Parties in the clergy sex abuse cases went into mediation in September. When the Archdiocese failed to set any claims in mediation, there was concern it would file bankruptcy, and if it did, what the bankruptcy would mean to survivors of sexual abuse. Still a little bit more to go on this, so we'll spend some time on this during the second half, but right now it's time for that big halftime show that you've all been looking forward to. The marching bands, the cheerleaders, the acrobats, the drill team, the synchronized card section in the stands, the sword swallowers, and that barrage of cannon fire at the end of the show. So sit back, chew on your popcorn, enjoy, and I'll see you for the second half.
point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
The Sessions era ends at the Justice Department. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Attorney General Jeff Sessions resigning at the president's request Wednesday. Reaction swift from congressional Democrats.
I find the timing very suspect, number one. But number two, our paramount view is that any attorney general, whether this one or another one, should not be able to interfere with the Mueller investigation in any way.
Senate Democrat leader Chuck Schumer says he fears a constitutional crisis if that happens. President Trump says he'll nominate a permanent replacement soon, but for now, Sessions' Chief of Staff Matthew Whitaker becomes the acting Attorney General and assumes oversight of the special counsel investigation, of which he's been critical in the past. Some Democrats are calling for Whitaker, like his predecessor, to recuse himself from the probe. At a White House news conference on Wednesday, the president said he is not worried about new congressional investigations when Democrats assume the House majority in January.
They can play that game, but we can play it better because we have a thing called the United States Senate, and a lot of very questionable things were done between leaks of classified information and many other elements that should not have taken place.
The president said there are many things that he and the Democrats can get along on. The White House Correspondents Association is calling on the administration to reverse its decision to strip CNN reporter Jim Acosta of his press pass following a heated confrontation with the president at that news conference on Wednesday. The group says the security credential is being used as a tool to punish a reporter. But Press Secretary Sarah Sanders accuses Acosta of placing his hands on the intern who tried to take the microphone away from him. Acosta says that did not happen. This is Fox News.
Enjoy a world-class breakfast in historic Talofofo at Jeff's Pirates Cove. Serving as both a military dispensary, recreation, and rehab center for pilots after the war, Jeff's Pirates Cove offers a taste of local history while you start your day with a delicious omelet or steak and eggs. If you're on a budget, pick up one of Jeff's $8 breakfasts, all served up with endless coffee. For reservations and information, call 789-COVE. That's 789-2683. Start your day at Jeff's Pirates Cove. Open daily at 8 a.m. in historic Ipan Talofofo.
The season of giving is here, and the stations of Choice Broadcasting want to give back. 93.3 The Point, Boss 104, Star 101, and Lux Guam present Charity of Choice. Each of our radio personalities have chosen a Guam charity that they would like to benefit.
And I chose Habitat for Humanity. Tune in daily to see how you can help.
Charity of Choice 2018 is brought to you by Choice Broadcasting Company, Lux Guam, American Water Tech, and the station that gives from the heart, 93.3 The Point.
It could be Thursday or Friday before Arizona residents know who their next U.S. senator will be. Technical troubles with the vote counting in a razor-thin race, delaying the declaration of a winner between Martha McSally and Kirsten Sinema. And the Florida Senate race may not be over.
It had been believed that Florida Governor Rick Scott, the Republican challenger to incumbent Democratic Senator Bill Nelson, was a victor by a slim lead. But as more ballots get counted, what was once a difference of 0.8% has gotten even tighter. Nelson's campaign says there are still more votes to be counted, and it could tip the scales in their favor, or at least get the tally down to less than a half percentage point, which legally triggers a recount. Nelson is a three-term incumbent, and should his loss be reversed, it could boost Democratic Party morale. In Miami, Eben Brown, Fox News.
Prison time for a former congressman who resigned in a corruption scandal.
It's 10 years in prison for former Texas Congressman Steve Stockman. The 61-year-old sentenced Wednesday for conspiring to bilk at least $1.2 million in donations to conservative foundations. The money was allegedly used to pay personal expenses and fund political ambitions. Stockman was convicted in April on 23 counts of mail and wire fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering. The Republican served in the U.S. House from 1995 to 97 and again from 2013 to 2015. He failed to knock off John Cornyn in a Senate bid in 2014. Two former aides who pleaded guilty in the case have yet to be sentenced. Kevin Battle, Fox News.
A man who vandalized President Trump's star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame has been sentenced to 3 years probation for Austin Clay, who had pled no contest to one felony count of vandalism. He must also attend psychological counseling and perform community service. He also has to make restitution of more than $9,400 to the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce for the damage that he did. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Super Typhoon U2 spared us here on Guam, but the same cannot be said for our neighboring islands. From now till November 16th, join us as we help Saipan and Tinian to get back on their feet. Acceptable donations include batteries, flashlights, tools, cleaning supplies, mosquito coils, rope, toiletries, personal hygiene items, and others. Donations can be dropped off to all GTA stores, the Guam Daily Post, all Guam Fire Department stations, and the Santa Teresita Catholic Church. For more information on how you can help, visit postguam.com.
Call the experts at Guam Hearing Doctors if you're worried about your hearing. The evaluation is simple and painless.
Konnichiwa! We'll be celebrating the 39th Japan Autumn Festival on Saturday, November 17th, 2 to 9 p.m. at the Governor Joseph Flores Beach Park or Ipao Park in Tumon. Parking will be available across Oka Payless with free shuttle service starting at 1:30 p.m. Advance tickets available now at the Japan Club of Guam office located on the first floor of PM Marine. Once again, the Japan Autumn Festival at Ipao Beach Park, November 17th from 2 to 9. Come, join us. For information, call 646-8066. Thank you to our platinum sponsor, Bank of Guam, and the radio stations of Choice Broadcasting.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Sanford Technology Group, STG, delivering service that can't be beat.
There's a reason every day a Guam homeowner is getting a solar system installed by Micronesia Renewable Energy. It's because MRE is the most trusted name in solar. With more solar energy solutions than any other solar company on island, homeowners have a choice to go solar for zero money down or take the path to ownership. Whichever way, it keeps our skies blue and your pockets green. And with the most experienced solar technicians and an energy production guarantee, there are no worries. Call 632-2613 for a free consultation. MRE, the smarter choice.
Jeff's Pirates Cove, open daily at 8 a.m., serving up hot breakfast with endless coffee and a taste of history. Celebrate Thanksgiving lunch at Jeff's Pirates Cove. Call them for reservations at 789-COVE.
It's Micronesia Mall's 30th anniversary, and to celebrate, we are giving away a new Kia Soul LX, a Mazda 3i Sport, the popular Honda Civic LX, and 30 Manila Flyaways during our 30th anniversary Drive-Away Flyaway. Win 3 great cars from Triple J Auto Group, 30 Flyaways from Philippine Airlines, plus thousands of prizes from Burger King and Foot Locker when you play Micronesia Mall's 30th anniversary Drive-Away Flyaway.
Yeah, it's no wonder that Tall Tales is the top-rated. It's no wonder that Tall Tales is the top-rated FM radio talk show in the Western afternoon radio talk show in the Western Pacific. With a halftime show like that, how can we miss? So before I jump back into bankruptcy here, I'm going to see what you guys on Facebook are chattering about. Let's see what I've got here. Ismail points out to Brad that getting one vote makes a person a winner. And Lynn and Vince Boro Paulino agree with Clayton, so I guess I might have had something going there when I gave Clayton that blue star. Jose Martinez says that Lou did run on her ability to give birth. What did she say? She was a nurse, a mother, a grandmother? Okay. Shelley Gibson gives a bravo to Clayton. Donna Mila Inta Titano got here in time for the big halftime show. Hope you enjoyed it, Donna Mila. Shelley Gibson wonders where folks have been. Carl Nelson says it's the honeymoon, talking about the election again. So I'm trying to be nice and allow them time to celebrate. It was a hard-fought race, not to mention expensive, over $100 a vote. But after the honeymoon, all elected need to be held accountable by the people. I'm skeptical of the media, except for Bob and Ray. Good call, Carl. Seems to be a left bias in the editorial media I've seen. I agree, certainly with the Daily News and the Post off and on. Carl Bora, let's see. Carl says gives Brad a laughing out loud, and then Carl comes back with a side note. The main thing is, can the elected of any gender, as you were, the elected of any gender, sexuality, or ethnicity do a good job? Everything else is non-relevant. Doesn't matter if the legislature is 15 women or 0 women. I tend to agree, Carl. I look more towards performance than this constant formation of people into identity groups. And unfortunately, I know the gathering into the identity groups has a rather sinister purpose, which I've talked about before. We don't have time to get into cultural Marxism now, but for sure I'll be coming back to it from time to time. Brad Oakenson adds a little humor to it by saying we need to make sure that the new directors are well qualified for the job, not just a brother-in-law with a pickup truck. And Rico, hello and welcome back to Tall Tales. So that's what folks on Facebook are saying. Finishing up here with the bankruptcy matter in the Archdiocese. The bankruptcy filing will automatically stop any further actions in the lawsuits that have been filed and will create a deadline for all Guam clergy claims, James said. James and Vernon said one benefit of bankruptcy is claimant anonymity. Hawaii-based attorney Randall Rosenberg, who is a member of the Paris Group, said that they will make sure their clients are zealously represented in this bankruptcy with respect and in a confidential manner. The mainland law firm of James, Vernon, and Weeks successfully represented hundreds of survivors of sexual abuse in bankruptcies filed by Catholic dioceses and religious orders across the country. James was a principal architect of the Northwest Jesuit settlement of $161 million, with 33 non-monetary demands met for protection of children and respect of abuse survivors. Now, I picked up from the other paper that the mediation will continue, but henceforth those participating in the media will be doing so under oath. And I believe it was David Lujan said that he saw this as a salutary development. So I've mentioned this before, but get out your law and order notebooks. We'll talk just a little bit about how a bankruptcy works. The way bankruptcy works is that sometimes a trustee is appointed, sometimes a debtor in possession is the trustee. And what the trustee does is he solicits all the outstanding claims against the bankrupt estate. He marshals all the assets of the bankrupt estate and makes a list of them. And then any of the creditors who have filed claims as creditors can submit a plan to the trustee as to how the assets of the bankrupt estate should be parceled out. And that goes before a judge. And every jurisdiction except this one, I think, there is an independent United States bankruptcy judge. Here, our district court judge, Francis Gatewood, is also the bankruptcy judge. Maybe because our district is so small that it was thought that it wasn't warranted to have an extra bankruptcy judge. So once the plan, there will be some contentious discussion in the development of a plan, but once a plan is developed, then the assets of the bankrupt estate are liquidated or partially liquidated and distributed to the claimants, to the creditors, in accordance with the plan that was approved by the court. The idea is that the bankrupt is allowed to continue in business. Bankruptcy is designed primarily for businesses, not for churches. And you remember when it seemed like every airline spent as much time in bankruptcy court as it did in the air. I think Continental declared bankruptcy 4 different times. So the thinking is that if a bankruptcy is properly conducted, the business can continue on, and an ongoing business is worth more than one that's stopped dead in its tracks and its assets are sold. So the theory with a Chapter 11 bankruptcy is that the bankrupt is allowed to continue in business and pay off its creditors, sometimes in installments, in accordance with the plan approved by the court. There are certain protections built into it. The bankrupt can't give preference to one creditor over another. There's something called avoidable preference, which arises if the bankrupt, say on day one, pays off one of its creditors completely, and then on day 15 declares bankruptcy. Well, the bankrupt trustee in bankruptcy would be required to go back and recover that earlier payment as a voidable preference. So that's how it works, and as per what I read, it's happened before, and so far every church that has gone Chapter 11 continued in operation, didn't lose its sacred sites or its schools, etc., survived the bankruptcy, and was able to make the creditors whole. So let's keep our fingers crossed, and I suppose say a prayer that this one is going to work just as well as the ones that we've been talking about. Let's see if I've got any Facebook comments here on. I think I do. Brad Hewitt is locked and loaded. Welcome to the firing line, Brad. And Brad says, why can't the Vatican pony up some money for each of the jurisdictions that are seeing lawsuits for their priests' sins? I suppose the best answer I could give you is because they don't want to. The way the Catholic Church is structured, it is a classic example of subsidiarity, that the dioceses in the church are the real kind of operating companies, and they operate almost completely independently from the Vatican as far as their financial transactions, etc., are concerned. There are regulations that the Vatican puts in place, etc., and they all have to, I would use the word tithe, but that doesn't work very well with the Catholic Church. They all kick into the Vatican treasury, but except as far as I know, except for various missionary undertakings, it's kind of a one-way street. But that's an interesting question, Brad. Carl says they can sell assets. There's a lot of gold, diamonds, and other precious metals and such in the Vatican, probably a few $1 billion in value. I don't know about that, Carl. I've done a little bit of reading about the Vatican, and I know that their artistic treasures are priceless. The statuary, the paintings, Sistine Chapel as an example. I don't know if they have a large cache of gold and diamonds. Maybe one of our Facebookers has some information on that. And Jack Hattick is suited up for today's game. Glad to see you back in uniform, Jack. And Carl Nelson, going back to his earlier comments, that he's being sarcastic, of course. That will never, ever happen. And Brad Hewitt, Archdiocese is a franchise, it appears, but when the guy with the funny hat says jump, they jump. Well, I don't think you're watching very closely right now, Brad, because there's an awful lot of dissent in the Catholic Church, not about financial matters, but matters of the current Pope and his relationship to Catholic doctrine. But that's off the subject of this bankruptcy. So I'm going to move on from the bankruptcy. If you have anything else you want to say, put it on Facebook, and we'll come back to it. I'm still waiting for somebody out there other than Clayton to dial 888-8255 and give me a hand doing all this jabbering here on Tall Tales. It's a lot of fun, and I really enjoy it, and it's perhaps as good a job as I've ever had. But I wouldn't mind chatting with one of you guys or gals if you should get up the ambition to give me a buzz. So the next thing I've got on the card here is the Independent Guahan versus okay. So I've got Jimmy on the line. Hello, Jimmy.
Yeah, there was an interesting book written by Anthony Burgess called Earthly Powers. It was about ecumenical pope. Well, it was about a lot of things, but the name of the book is Earthly Powers.
Uh-huh.
It was written by Anthony Burgess. He just died maybe 5-10 years ago. He's not alive, but he was a very good writer. And do you have time to hear?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Jimmy. Yeah.
I just gave you the title. I gave you the author.
I got it, yeah.
Anyone who's got the sense, they can look it up. Anthony Burgess.
I got it.
Earthly Powers is about, the hardback is about 2 inches thick, maybe 800 pages. I don't know.
Okay, well, share.
I just read them.
Share some of the wisdom that Anthony Burgess communicated, Jimmy, if you can.
Oh, he's the guy that wrote Clockwork Orange.
Okay.
You know the movie?
I beg your pardon?
Clockwork Orange?
Yeah, I saw it a long time ago. Yeah, it's not exactly. I like westerns, Jimmy. You know, cowboys and Indians and sheriffs.
No. Clockwork Orange.
Yeah, I said I saw it a long time ago. But it's not my kind of movie. I'm more into westerns. But I know what you're talking about.
Did you see Sam Peckinpah?
The Wild Bunch.
Oh, bring me the head of somebody else.
Yeah, Pablo somebody. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, that's Peckinpah, and there's Okay. What was? Excuse me for asking. No, I won't. But anyway, a good book.
Okay, Jimmy. I'll put that on my reading list.
And the corruption. Earthly Powers.
Earthly Powers.
Anthony Burgess. And it won't hurt you to read it, but you just take your time. And I know you're an old guy, so you don't have much time left. I'm an old guy, too. I don't have much time left either.
What is the old saying? Misery loves company, Jimmy. Us short-timers got to make the best use of our time, right?
And happiness shares.
Right. Okay.
Bye.
Goodbye, Jimmy. Yeah, well, you know, it's not easy to be an aged curmudgeon here on Tall Tales. It's not a job that everybody could do. I probably do. When it comes to being an aged curmudgeon, I could probably do it just as well or maybe better than anybody else that is available to fill the position, right, Real Joe Cruz?
That's true. Really put a smile on my face. How he said, "We don't have much time."
Yeah, not much sand left in the top of that hourglass. So let's see, where was I before Jimmy and I had our little chat about superannuation? Oh, yeah, independent Guahan versus the United States Navy. And this deals with a demonstration that Inarahan Guahan had, and this is kind of an old story. It goes all the way back to Saturday. They had a demonstration at the main gate to NCS, and they're complaining about the destruction of what they described as an ancient Chamorro village called Magua aboard what I call NCS. You know, the Navy, like every other military organization, changes the name of everything about 10 or 15 years. I suppose just to confuse old guys like me. And if that's the reason, it works. And the Navy has its own story. The Navy says, well, yeah, we were aware of that location. It was a temporary location. And we gathered up the artifacts and put them in a safe place until a proper disposition of them can be made. This didn't satisfy folks like Independent Guahan and Proteji Latexan, who had a demonstration Saturday in front of the main gate of NCS. And here are some quotes. A lady named Monica Flores: history is repeating itself, and it needs to stop now. The military has proven that it can do whatever it wants against the will and rights of the Chamorro people and our rights to protect our sacred lands. The Navy, the contractor, and all parties involved must be held accountable for the destruction of our environment and invaluable cultural resources, as well as contamination. Flores expressed frustration that despite military officials referring to GovGuam and island residents as, quote, partners, military build-up developments and processes have been rather one-sided. When we attended the meeting at Guam Preservation Trust last week, we asked that all sacred and ancient settlement sites be monitored and that the SHPO demand that construction stop until we know that the sites are protected. The military continues to prove that they cannot be trusted as partners in the buildup. As native peoples of the Pacific, we must demand that our rights to live in peace in our homelands be honored and that our ancestors be respected. And then the rest of the article is from Lieutenant McConaughey, and it's the Navy's side of the story, which is what I just explained. So enough of that. We've got the seventh inning stretch coming up. I don't know if Jack Hattick is going to bat today or play in the outfield, or maybe he's just going to sit in the stands and watch the game today. He's had some really pretty hard innings here recently. Anyhow, after the seventh inning stretch, we'll go to the the United States versus the Chamorro Land Trust Commission.
For over 30 years, Sanford Technology Group has been helping companies throughout Guam and Micronesia with their payroll, time and attendance, networking, and other information technology services. Our online integrated payroll and time and attendance solution provides the workforce management tools and expertise to make your business more efficient and employee-friendly. For more information, visit Sanford Technology at 335 South Marine Corps Drive or call us at 647-0220 to schedule a demo today.
Sanford Technology Group.
And Jack Hattig is doing the color for today's game, and Jack announces the best part of Tall Tales, the 7th inning stretch. Go Cubbies. And let's see, Daryl Haggerty wants to know if I announced who's playing left. And of course I didn't. And Albert Eliasson asks, of course, the key question, who's on first? And Real Joe Cruz, who's on first?
I'm not sure who's on first.
Yeah, who's on first?
Who's on first?
Yes, he is.
And who's on second?
What's on second?
Oh. You confuse me, Bob.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's pretty easy. Who's on first?
Well, it's a bit of a kerfuffle.
Yeah, okay. Well, anyhow, who's on first? What's on second? I don't know. Third base, right? And Jose Martinez says, many of those activists support the destruction of Chamorro children. Why would the feds care then about the destruction of Chamorro artifacts? That's kind of inflammatory there, Jose. I know what you're driving at. And let's see here. I think I pretty... Oh, Brad Hokinson says he's been accused of being a curmudgeon. Only accused, Brad, never convicted? I think I was convicted probably at least 20 years ago of being a serial curmudgeon, as it were. But anyhow, let's get back to the Fed's challenge of the Guam Defense of the Land Trust Act. And this is pretty interesting. DOJ sued GovGuam in September 2017, contending that the Chamorro Land Trust Act provides preferential housing benefits only to those it defines as native Chamorros, and therefore it discriminates on the basis of race and national origin in violation of the Fair Housing Act. Guam Deputy Attorney General Kenneth Orcutt filed an opposition to that argument on October 2, writing, quote, the CLTC has nothing to do with perpetuating racial discrimination in housing and has everything to do about rectifying the inequities of the post-war land taking by the United States military. However, in his response, Assistant United States Attorney John Gore maintained the government of Guam argued precisely the opposite in Santos versus Ada, claiming that the CLTA did not restore land to those who lost it. That case was filed in 1992 by the late Angel Santos, and the Chamorro Nation against then-Governor Joseph Atta. The Superior Court issued a decision upholding the validity of the Chamorro Land Trust Act and ordered its implementation at the time. Now the DOJ Civil Rights Division maintains the CLTA is racially discriminatory. None of GovGuam's new theories can explain how a program that Guam admitted was unlawful race discrimination in 1992 is race neutral and non-discriminatory in 2018. The Department of Justice argues that neither Congress nor other parts of the federal government authorize the government of Guam to enact a CLTA. CLTA's definition of native Chamorros uses ancestry as a proxy for race. Defendants assert that the CLTA's eligibility requirement is political, not racial. And defendants also assert the United States has a trust duty towards Chamorros. Now, I went back and dug out the paper that the Department of Justice is referring to. It's a memorandum filed by the Attorney General of Guam over the signature of Elizabeth Barrett Anderson, and was filed in the case of Santos versus Atta. Now, historical background, in 1975, the legislature passed the Chamorro Land Trust Act, and the thrust of the Chamorro Land Trust Act was that all of the land that the government of Guam owned was designated as reserved lands and was reserved to be parceled out in leasehold interests to Chamorros. And the parceling was to be done by the Chamorro Land Trust Commission. That statute was and as far back to the reserved lands again, all of the government of Guam owned land except those parts that were removed from it because it was necessary for government operations. All the rest of it went into the Chamorro Land Trust inventory. So nothing happened on that act from 1975 down to right around 1989 or 1990, sometime in that time frame, when Angel Santos and the Chamorro Nation conducted what amounted to sort of a sit-in strike in front of Adelup, protesting the lack of implementation of the Chamorro Land Trust Act. Suit was filed in the Superior Court, and Judge B.J. Cruz ruled in favor of of Angel Santos. The suit was for what was called a writ of mandate. A writ of mandate commands a government official, basically it commands a government official to do his job if his job is ministerial. Well, B.J. ruled in favor of Angel Santos, and for interesting reasons, the government of Guam decided not to appeal that decision. But this is one of the papers that was filed on the 15th of May of 1992 over Elizabeth Barrett Anderson's signature. The Chamorro Land Trust Act discriminates on the basis of race and national origin. Only those people who are native Chamorros are entitled to receive the benefits of the Act, Title 21 GCA 75107. Clearly, this creates a class of preferred citizens based upon race and national origin. Guam is a multiracial community, and many of its non-Chamorro citizens would be excluded from the benefits of the Act. It's kind of a mouthful, isn't it? Also, the Chamorro Land Trust Act does not state the stated purpose of providing land to those who lost land due to the federal entry of the entry of the federal government. Chamorro Land Trust does not promise land to the landless. The landless are not guaranteed land under the Act. Even the wealthiest, who fits the definition of native Chamorro, would be entitled to land. A more narrowly defined law could accomplish the goal of giving land to those who lost it. But the Chamorro Land Trust didn't do that. And then there was an older government of Guam law, Public Law 1-33, and it established the priorities for applicants to lease or buy government property. The first priority, persons who have had all their land acquired by the United States, the naval government, or the government of Guam, and who have owned no other land since January 1, 1946. Second, persons who have had substantial portion of their land acquired by the United States, the naval government of Guam, or the government of Guam since July 1, 1944. The remaining portion of whose land is not adequate or sufficient. Former government code, let's see, oh, that's it. So, and those lands were repealed when the Chamorro Land Trust passed. Those lands, those acts, were actually repealed. So that there was at one time statutory authority to provide leasehold interest to people whose land had been taken by the United States. But the Chamorro Land Trust Act took those off the books, and according to Elizabeth Barrett Anderson and the Guam Attorney General's office, the Chamorro Land Trust Act is racially discriminatory. Now, of course, the best defense, and of course that really shoots down Ken Orcutt's argument about the purpose of the Chamorro Land Trust Act, and I've debunked that myself. I've heard people in the last campaign say, well, you know, the Chamorro Land Trust Act, that was the reason for that was because so much land was taken by the U.S. government and to make those people whole. Well, it just wasn't the case. And that makes Ken Orcutt's position kind of embarrassing. And I think probably the best defense that the government of Guam has in the face of those papers filed in court, and the government of Guam is kind of bound by its earlier filings. The only defense that I could think of is that old defense called, well, that was then, but this is now, so it really doesn't count. Or maybe somebody had maybe whoever wrote that brief for Elizabeth Barrett Anderson had her fingers crossed at the time she was writing the brief, so it doesn't really count. Let's see what's going on in Facebook here. Elmore is cottoning to the program again. And Daryl Taggarty, Maneka's perspective, going back to the Protege La Texan versus the Navy, Maneka's perspective, the mission should be somewhere include that the military is protecting civilian life from foreign enemies. When simple residents and citizens have a dispute with military activities, what do the legal restrictions on their activities say? Moral posturing promotes political activism, but is ineffective civic action. Well, as far as the question, when simple residents and citizens have a dispute with military activities, what the legal restrictions on their activities say, a lot of folks have sued the military on environmental concerns and other things like that. In fact, Levin Camacho probably cut his spurs suing the U.S. government over the location of the tentative location of the Marine Corps base out in the Pocket area. So there are legal remedies. And then Daryl goes on to say, moral posturing promotes political activism, but is ineffective civic action. Brad Wilkinson, how do they do it in Hawaii? I suspect that every military base in Hawaii has somebody appointed to look out after the archaeological aspects of the base. I don't know, but I'm just speculating on that. So going then from there to the next item on the card, I've got Paul Pablo versus the legislature. And this one relates to a Daily News editorial, a Daily News article that goes back to the 2nd of November, but it's still timely. And it's $30 million in tax amnesty gained and lost. Rev Tax urges senators for clearer laws. Yeah, somebody at Rev Tax says to the legislature, you should make your laws clearer. And I'll pick that up here in the article. And the title of this item on the card is Paul Pablo versus Governor, as you were, BJ versus Paul Pablo versus the legislature. So Rev Tax's Paul Pablo appealed to senators to make sure the language in their bills is clear. As an example, the 2019 budget law did not have an effective date for the increase in property tax for improvements or buildings of $1 million. Now, I was pretty hard on Rev Tax when they came out with that one, because that's really very elemental. That's, you know, that's the episode of Law and Order called Dick and Jane. So, wow, is it that time already? Yeah, okay, I'm going to work on this a little bit, Carl, and then I'll bring you in to help me close the program here. We're already up to the home stretch.
If you can dream uncommon design and unprecedented engineering, you define the 2018 Lexus. The boldly designed IS Sport Sedan's aggressive design stimulates the senses.
Advanced paddle shifting puts the exhilarating performance of the IS Sport Sedan at your fingertips. With deep, luxurious seating, the ES350 offers an ultimate level of comfort, while cutting-edge engineering delivers a thrilling drive.
Put yourself in a 2018 Lexus.
Now with special incentives.
At Atkins Kroll.
So here we are in the home stretch. Maybe I'll hang on to this item here dealing with Rev Tax until tomorrow. I've got a couple of posts here and a Carl hanging on the line. Jose Martinez, it's harsh. That is his comment, was harsh. But the reality is that the disconnect with the passion for inanimate objects over human life is unconscionable. They, meaning the Prote-Latexan and Independent Guahan folks, they have signs that ironically say, defend the sacred. And then Jose asks rhetorically, seriously? Interesting points. And, of course, Jose is talking about the A word here that nobody wanted to talk about until the last couple of weeks of the election, the A word being abortion. So going from there, we got about 10 more minutes of tall tales. I'm going to see what our Carl has to say about today's festivities. Go ahead, our Carl.
Oh, thanks, Bob. Yeah, I've been listening as much as I could, and I didn't catch every single thing that went on, but, you know, I hope I'm not retreading ground you've already covered. I just called in to comment about the Magua issue.
Go ahead.
I have a friend that knows what he's talking about. I didn't have permission to use his name, so I can't use his name, but he absolutely would know what he's talking about. And he said he is asked to look at the agreement, and in reviewing it, he said he saw what he saw was an agreement for artifact recovery and preservation only. And there was nothing about agreeing not to bulldoze the area. It was to protect the artifacts there and keep them intact, keep them in good condition. And I don't know if this has come out. I haven't spotted anything about it. But I think the prudent thing would have been, when this happened, to wait and see. Well, let's get their side of the story. Let's look at the agreement. Is there any problem? But I think there was an over-eagerness to jump on this while it was still fresh and before anyone could come up with any reasons why it happened or what happened. Like the next day or two, there was, just pure outrage. And there was really no interest in investigating and finding out, was there actually a problem? What was the actual agreement? Was there a violation? And I think it was milked pretty much for political purposes, and it worked. It has served its purpose.
Well, it gives them some earned media. And, this article says, this is quoting Maneka Flores, when we attended the meeting at Guam Preservation Trust last week, we asked that all sacred and ancient settlement sites be monitored and that the SHPO demand that construction stop until we know what sites are protected. And when this first came up, the Navy did have a response. Obviously, it wasn't satisfactory to the Protege folks, but I said the same thing. I'd be interested in seeing what the language of the programmatic agreement actually said, because it's one thing when someone does something that you don't like or that you don't want them to do. It's something else when they do something that they're not supposed to do, because there's documentation prohibiting them from doing it. And of course, earned media is the name of the game here. And I'm looking at a picture of someone holding a sign saying Chamorro land, sacred land. And the article says, one sign even cited an article of the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples stating, quote, indigenous peoples have the right to the lands, territories, and resources which they have traditionally owned, occupied, or otherwise used or acquired. So that's the message. The message is, as I understand it and as they have communicated it, is not that the Navy broke a law, not that the Navy broke an agreement. It's that the Navy did something we didn't like, and because they did something we didn't like, we now are taking to the streets with our signs. And this is I'm turning my sarcasm light on here for a moment, Carl. And I have to wonder if members of those groups put a sign on the mirror in their bathroom. So when they get up in the morning, if they're shaving or brushing their teeth or whatever they do in the morning, they look in the mirror and they see this sign on the corner of the mirror that says, be angry about something today. Because that seems to be the MO, to find something to be angry about. And it's kind of like, remember Ned Pablo, who was perhaps the most unsuccessful person to run for election this time around, and how he was standing around at the Nick Tam's area with his sign, and also at Anderson, projecting a rather angry image. You remember that, Carl?
Yes, I do remember.
So that seems to be the MO, and I guess you don't really disagree with me, right?
No, things like this call to mind. The words of I believe he was a former cabinet member for President Obama, Rahm Emanuel, and his famous line was, "Never let a good crisis go to waste."
Right.
And I think pretty much the strategy is to wait around patiently for the next crisis, the next time something in any way gets out of line, and just hop on that and protest and just milk it for as much as possible and get as much anger worked up in the community to grow the movement. and it's all very strategic. You know, I'm seeing a lot of very strategic things happening, and it's very interesting to observe. It's educational.
Very much so. So you strike a responsive chord with one of our listeners here, our Carl. Jack Heddick says, as usual, our Carl hits the nail squarely on the head.
Well, I think that's more the law of averages. If I swing the hammer, you know, enough dozens of times, you eventually hit a nail somewhere. So,
your modesty is quite compelling, Carl. And then Ishmael Velez chimes in and says, "Be angry about something today." Sounds like a first sergeant. First sergeant, of course, is somebody in the Army, so I think that it's an apt analogy, but probably not very applicable to the folks who are demonstrating at the front gate of a naval base, right?
Very true. Okay, Bob, thank you for letting me chime in. I appreciate it.
Anytime, Carl.
As usual.
Okay, well, we'll see you tomorrow on Tall Tales.
All right.
How long? So I've got about 5 minutes more to go here until we hear the plaintive strains of Ravel's Bolero. Maybe I'll stumble around a little bit here with Paul Pablo till to the end of the program. I don't think I can really do it justice, but Paul Pablo says that senators should make language in their bills more clear. And then as an example, the 2019 budget law that did not have an effective date for the increase in tax for property improvements of $1 million. The Director of Revenue Taxation had to ask the Attorney General for an opinion on that. And the answer to that question is so basic that I suspect that 90% of the folks in Tall Tales could have answered the question. And that is that if a bill passes and it doesn't have a section that says this act shall be effective on the 4th of July or the 12th of never or whatever, it is effective on midnight the day that the governor signs it. If the governor doesn't sign it, if he lets it become law without his signature, it becomes law on midnight of the 10th day. If the governor vetoes and the veto is overridden, it becomes effective midnight the day of the override. That's way up at the front of the book in the Guam Code. And I can't imagine anybody who holds himself out as a tax collector not knowing that simple bit of statutory construction. But you'll recall BJ had to get after them because they weren't enforcing the new tax. And they said because they didn't know when it was effective. So that was part of it. And then we went to the second part. RevTax said it will implement the new rate in fiscal 2020, but Public Auditor Benjamin Cruz said the tax effect takes effect when the budget bill becomes law. Easy. Then the next part of it goes to clarification on the property tax provision. RevTax sent a letter to the AG this week. Pablo said again, seeking clarification of the property tax provision of the 2019 budget law because the law states that the tax increase applies only to improvements or buildings with a value of $1 million. Pablo said there's a question whether those buildings worth $1.2 million or $1.5 million, for example, should also be taxed. In other words, he's asking the question, well, we know what to do if the building is worth $1 million, but if it's worth more than $1 million, then we don't know what to do. It goes back to an old common law term called the negative pregnant, which is pretty interesting, but I won't have time to explain it today. I think just for comedy relief, I'll pick this one up tomorrow at the beginning of the card so we could properly do it justice. And I can once again make a suggestion to the director of revenue. Maybe it'll be the new director of revenue and taxation will pay some attention to what I think is an outstanding idea on this particular subject. In any case, we got about half a minute, so I'm going to say adios, esta gupa. It's been fun. Thank you.